So let's go over the most important exercises for a female gaze physique. And as a disclaimer, right, the most important muscles for the female gaze will always be just your face height, frame, and your hair as well. But you can still work with what you have. So first one, it's going to be a direct abs exercise, whether through a decline sit-up where you hold the weight behind your neck or through a standing cable crunch, not a kneeling one, because these two ab exercises specifically, they're basically impossible to mess up, right? Let's say you do a hanging leg raise. It's really easy for you on the hanging leg raise to end up only using your hip flexors and not working your abs. Same thing with a kneeling cable crunch, right? A kneeling cable crunch, it's really easy for you to just end up flexing at the hip and mess up the exercise. But with a decline sit up where you hold the weight behind your neck and with a standing cable crunch, they're basically impossible to mess up. For the sit up, you basically just have to sit up like you would a sit up and it's impossible to mess up. And for a standing cable crunch, you literally just have to bend forward as much as you can. And specifically for a standing cable crunch, if you don't have this type of pad setup in your cable machine and you just have a normal cable setup, I would recommend you heavily to get one of those squat pads, which most gyms will have these, and just take the pad and use the hole in the pad and then put it onto your cable machine because you do not want to have the metal pole jamming into your crack, especially as you get to heavier and heavier weights. And these two exercises, you should be progressively overloading them, especially the standing cable crunch. They're really stable and you can really get strong at these. And specifically, I put abs first because abs are, in my opinion, probably the most important muscle group for a female gaze physique. And if you want to know what a female gaze physique actually looks like, the best way to do this, right, is not to listen to other dudes. It's to just go on TikTok, right? Go on TikTok. And there are specific keywords you can look up on TikTok, such as biceps or abs. And if you look up these specific keywords, you will get these female gaze physiques where you can look at the video on TikTok and then check the comments as well to confirm that it's not just a bunch of dudes. And specifically keywords like abs and biceps, because let's say you look up something like rear delts or even lats on the TikTok search, you're going to end up finding just a bunch of gym cell posts from dudes where they demonstrate optimal exercises and get comments from dudes. But specific keywords like abs and biceps, that's where you're going to get these types of posts like this one. And also, right, instead of saying something like lats, you're going to have to type something like V-shaped body, right? You can't use the exact terminology. You have to kind of put yourself in the shoes of uh, the females, right? But the reason why abs are such an important muscle group for, your female gaze physique is because if you look at a lot of these like pretty boy type physiques, they don't actually have that much muscle, right? They don't like he's still muscular, but he doesn't have a crazy amount of muscle like the gym cells. But the reason why his physique is so good is, well, firstly because face, hair, whatever, but it's because firstly he's lean and he has very developed abs, very visible and defined abs. And defined abs are not just a function of being lean, it's a function of being lean and have actually hypertrophied abdominal muscles, right? That's why we do these like loadable, stable ab exercises that you can progressively overload for years. And as proof of the importance of direct ab training, I have these two photos. First one is a marathon runner who's probably sub 10% body fat, right? Very, very lean, very skinny, but you can see he does not have abs because even though he is super lean, he just does not have any muscle, right, in his chest, in his shoulders, in his biceps. Literally, like, no muscle. And because of that, because even though he's lean, doesn't have any abs. On the other hand, Eddie Hall, right, you can see he's not very lean, right? He's way higher body fat than this guy. But because of how developed his ab muscles is, you can just see how huge they are. They protrude out even at higher body fat percentages. And this just goes to show the importance of direct ab training because the abs are just like any other muscle group, right? Getting lean will make them more defined, but if you don't have the actual size in the first place, then they're not going to show, even if you are very lean. That's why a lot of guys, they get lean, but they fell for the meme of abs are made in the kitchen. So they don't do any direct ab training. They rely maybe on compound exercises. So when they do get lean, it's like they don't have very defined abs, whereas someone else with the same body fat percentage has way more defined abs, and they believe that it's just because they're not lean enough. But in reality, you can have abs at higher body fat percentages if you just train them. And again, right, the whole thing with the female gaze physique, it's not just maximizing muscle because then you'll just be like a gym cell. It's having it in the right places, being lean, and just having really defined abs. That is one of the key halos for a female gaze physique. Now, next one, right? Again, you can go on TikTok and look up abs, biceps, check the comments, and then you can get an idea. Next one is going to be the biceps brachii, and there's going to be two options: a preacher curl for the biceps brachii for most people. You can do dumbbell, you can do any kind of free weight preacher curl, right? Dumbbell or barbell. If you are doing a machine preacher curl, make sure that it is a preacher curl that is hardest at the bottom and easiest at the top. Because most machines have an even resistance profile or even hardest at the top, which is what we don't want. Or you can do a recline curl. And you might be looking at this, right? You can do recline curls if you are a science-based lifting autist, but you might be looking at this and think, hey, these two just kind of look like the same. And they pretty much are the same, but it's just that the recline curls, you are leaning your body backwards like this so that you are parallel to the bench, right? That's what this guy's doing. You're parallel to the bench, and the idea is to minimize shoulder flexion for a little bit more biceps activation. But really, most people, preacher curl is fine, right? You can do preacher curl, it's fine. If you really want to be super optimal, then you can do a recline curl, but it's really not that big of a deal. And as for why biceps are such an important muscle group for the female gaze physique, right? Again, you can go on TikTok, search and look up the word biceps, right? That's going to be one of the key words where you're actually going to get comments from girls instead of just optimal gym bros, right? But go on TikTok and look up biceps and you can find posts like this. And the theory I have to present to you is that the specific shape of the bicep, right? You can see the bulge, right? This bulging shape along with the shadow at the bottom, it triggers like a similar response to when guys see cleavage, right? Because of the bulging shape. And again, right? If you want to do your own research, just go on TikTok and look up the word biceps, right? If you look up triceps, you're just going to get a bunch of dudes posting about optimal triceps exercises and only comments from other men. But if you look up specifically biceps, just the word itself, that's when you're going to get posts like this, and then you can check the comments as well. But specifically, you want the shape to be, it doesn't have to be huge. You want the shape to be something like this, and you want to be defined, right? Again, this is a function of low body fat, importance of low body fat, and defined enough so you have this like shadow and this shape, and this bulging shape, right? It's going to trigger the same part of the brain as when guys see this cleavage. And again, right, for the whole preacher curl thing, just set it around 60 degrees if you can. If you're using a bench, that's going to be the most optimal angle. But if you're doing it on a preset preacher curl bench where it's more like 45 degrees, it's not that big of a deal, right? It's a 15 degrees difference. If you're not a science-based autist, then it's really not that deep, right? And as another few notes on biceps, right? Specifically the appearance of biceps, just having big biceps, right? It's about the shape, right? Can you create the shape and have this definition? This is what your goal should be to look like. We can just drag this out. This is what your goal should be to look like. You can have like this guy, he's I think called basement bodybuilding. You can see he's really strong at preacher curls. He can do like 120 something pounds on the preacher curl, and he has pretty big biceps, but he has high body fat percentage. So, you know, it doesn't have that defined shadow at the bottom. It's not that defined. And he just in general doesn't have amazing insertions. And also you can see his arms is quite a bit triceps dominant, right? This is what you want to avoid. If you ever look up biceps on TikTok and see this kind of arm, you can see that they're always very biceps dominant and not very triceps dominant. Whereas most gym bros tend to be way more triceps dominant and from like bench pressing and stuff. And if you're triceps dominant, that can really create the appearance of a fat arm, as I like to call it. So again, right, you can see based on bodybuilding here, he's higher body fat, doesn't have that good insertions. So you can kind of see in a lot of his videos, his arms kind of look fat, if you want to use that word to describe it. So again, it shows the importance of having low body fat. And another thing is the length of your limbs, right? I have Mike Israel over here who has pretty short arms. And because of his short arms, and also he's triceps dominant, his arms just don't look that impressive, right? You can see even though he's super lean, he doesn't have that same defined shape as this guy, even though he's like way leaner, like literally on stage. He just has short limbs and he has bad insertions, and his arms is also really triceps dominant as well. So that's going to be some phalos that you should look for. But again, right, you never know unless you actually grow your biceps and get lean. So get your preacher curl up, get strong at the preacher curl, grow your biceps, get lean. Then you can see if you have truly fucked up insertions or if you have aesthetic biceps. And chances are you're going to have some pretty decent biceps as well. All right, the next one is going to be lats, specifically biasing the lower lats with a wide grip pull-up or a keen and flap. So these basically have the same arm path, right? You're doing it in the frontal plane, which is like that, where you hold a wide grip. And keen and flap, it's just like a pullover, but done from the side. Like you can look at the arm path, right? He's pulling the arms from up here to down here. That's the same thing as a keen and flap, basically. And specifically, when you train your lats with a wide grip pull down or a wide grip pullover, like in this motion in the frontal plane, you're going to bias more of the lower lats. Again, it's going to train the whole lats, but it's going to bias the lower part more. Whereas if you do any kind of rowing exercise or neutral grip chin up, that's going to bias more of the upper lats. And we want to bias the lower lats more because it's going to create more of a V shape, right? You can just imagine if you have the lower lats, you're going to get more of a V shape in your body. Whereas if you bias mainly your upper lats, you're going to get more of a Y shape where you have the lats up here, but then they're not going to sweep all the way down, if that makes sense. I know my drawing is really bad, but we want to bias the lower lats because it's going to give you more of a complete V shape in your upper body. And again, right, this comes down to your insertions as well and where your lats insert, but this is just how you can maximize it. And a lot of people, if you might think that you have really high lat insertions, but really it's just that your lower lats are not that developed. And if you want reference on, again, the TikTok female gaze physique, you have to look up words like V-shaped body for reference. If you look up lats, V-taper, side delts, or any of those like really gym bro terms, you're going to end up getting gym bro posts with only male comments. And yeah, you're not going to get that female gaze research that you're looking for. And a key concept I want you to know is shape over size. And this is going to be life fuel, right? This is going to be hope for a lot of people with narrow clavicles or frame cells, because the thing is, even if you have a narrow frame, right? Even if the absolute measurement of your clavicles, the absolute measurement of your bideltoid is not very wide, if you can create that V shape, then you can still have a very attractive physique in terms of the female gaze, right? Because the V shape in guys is like the hourglass shape, in women. And my drawing's terrible. It's like the hourglass shape in women. And you can see Leon Edwards, he doesn't have very wide clavicles, right? His clavicles aren't actually that wide. But because he, gained a few inches of bideltoid through his shoulders, right? Through his side delts, you can see how his side delts increases bideltoid. And he also has lats that sweep all the way down. That creates this Y shape all the way down, which further creates this effect of the V-shaped body. That's why he is one of the most aesthetic physiques in the UFC, as Mario Rios would say. And same thing with this girl, right? You can see her absolute measurement, right? If you were to take a tape measure, are not actually that crazy, right? She doesn't have very big absolute measurement, but because she has the size, most guys would still find that effective. So this is going to be life fuel for a lot of narrow clavicle guys. Even if you have a narrow bideltoid in terms of absolute measurement, if you can build up the lats, specifically the lower lats, which will give you the complete V shape instead of just this like Y shape thing, when you focus on the upper lats, when you develop the lower lats, you build your delts and you create this V shape, as long as you have the shape, which again, this also depends on your clothing and how well the clothes fit you, but that's for like whole nother video. If you can create this V shape, you don't need to have the widest absolute measurement, right? Just like how this girl, shape over size. And I'll also pick up another example. And you can see how this fat guy, even though he probably has a wider bideltoid measurement in terms of absolute measurement, because he doesn't have the same shape, he's not lean, he doesn't have the defined abs and all of these features, his physique is way less aesthetic uh, than Leon Edwards, not just in terms of like a gym cell perspective, but also in terms of, the female gaze perspective. So yeah, that's the whole concept of shape over size and the importance of prioritizing the lower lats with wide grip pull-ups or wide grip pull-downs. And you can also do cable pull-downs with a wide grip, but honestly, the wide grip pull-down is very underrated in my opinion because it's actually really stable, especially as you get to heavier weight. Now the next one is gonna be a reverse grip Smith machine bench press for the upper chest. And really, you can do any kind of chest pressing exercise with a neutral grip or a supinated grip or just anything that's like going to involve more shoulder flexion. So where your elbows are tucked to your side instead of flared out. Because when you do this, you're going to do a lot more shoulder flexion and it's going to hit your upper chest, the clavicular head, way more, right? You can see how doing a Smith machine reverse grip bench, the arm path, if I can draw a line, the arm path, the way he presses up, it's literally the same as if you were doing a low to high cable fly. And that's actually going to target your upper chest even more than a lot of incline presses. Because the way people do a lot of incline presses is they would set the incline up, but they would flare their elbows out. So it's really wide. So it's mainly horizontal adduction. And they would also arch as well with a low incline. So this is going to be a way better exercise for the clavicular head of your chest. And again, if you have something like a Nautilus Nitro press, some Prime Fitness press, any like neutral grip press machine, you can also use that. But I'm just going to give you the reverse grip Smith machine because it's the one I use and it's also really good for pretty much any gym, right? If you have a Smith machine, you can also do this on a free weight barbell, which is not as good, but you can still do it. It's just way more accessible for everyone. And in terms of the upper chest, right, this is going to be one of the most important regions again in your physique, right? All of these are going to be the most important regions, right? These are the top 5, and specifically the upper chest, because if you have a developed upper chest, that's going to be a huge halo. And this is my take when it comes to the chest, right? In my previous videos, I've talked about how overdeveloping the chest could actually mess up your physique, and chest isn't like as high of a priority muscle as something like your delts. And I still stand by it, but this is what I'll say. If you have a big chest, right, a well-developed chest, and you have a full upper pec, right, the clavicular head from doing any kind of neutral grip pressing or low to high cable fly, that can actually be a really good halo, and that can be a net positive for your physique because you're going to get this complete developed chest look. But if you have developed chest, right, mid to lower chest, as Andrew Tate has over here, but you do not have a developed upper pec, you can see how his upper chest is literally sunken in. That can actually look quite subhuman, and it can actually be a huge net negative for your physique. And again, like in my past Discord server, I've had guys who basically only did weighted dips, only did a lot of like benching with an arch, mainly weighted dips, and they just end up getting this look where they have a developed mid to lower chest, but then their upper chest is literally just non-existent, and it can really mess up your physique. So, you can do a low to high cable fly if you want, but what I would recommend is just switch your main chest pressing exercise into some kind of shoulder flexion based press. So again, I recommend Smith machine reverse grip. Any kind of neutral grip machine press could also work. And this is just gonna make it so that you can fill out your upper chest, because people tend to focus way more on their pressing exercises, and they don't treat like any kind of low to high fly as their main exercise, which you should. So yeah, that's like super important part. Make sure you develop your upper chest. And last thing, this is the recommendation for programming. You can do a flexion based press, right, like the reverse grip bench I talked about, with a flat pec deck, flat fly, because any kind of pec deck flat pec deck is going to train the whole chest, including the upper chest. So you can do that like maybe on full body days, full body A, full body B, that can be how you rotate it. Or on a upper body day, you can do one set of each. Or you can do a flat press, right? Just a flat press that you do with a low to high fly. So flexion, fly. But again, I would recommend you way more to stick this combination where you do a reverse grip bench with a pec deck. Next one, last one, is going to be the shoulders. And it's going to be specifically a elbow loaded lateral raise. So literally any kind of lateral raise where the weight is loaded at your elbow. So it can be something with a cuff, like a cuff cable lateral raise, or it can be a machine, because most people tend to do lateral raises when you use dumbbells or cables where you hold the weight in your hand. And that can be good as well, right? But specifically, the main reason I would recommend you use a elbow loaded lateral raise, which you can even do an upright row if you want, is because there's a psychological element of progressing faster. Because when you do lateral raises where you hold the weight, like let's say cable or dumbbell, where you hold the weight in your hand versus when you load it at your elbow, you're still getting the same stimulus in terms of bicep growth. In terms of side delt growth, right? Still getting the same stimulus. You're not getting a greater stimulus just from loading it at the elbow. But firstly, it's more comfortable. But main thing is that you're able to progress faster, right? You can add weight faster, which it doesn't mean you're going to grow your lateral delts faster in and of itself, but it's just a psychological aspect of being able to add weight faster, add more weight. It's just going to make it way more fun. You're going to stick to it. You're going to train harder. And it's just boring, right? Let's say you're doing lateral raises with dumbbells and you're stuck at like 30, 35-pound dumbbells. It's just boring to do the same weight for months or even a year. So if you do any kind of elbow loaded lateral raise, it's going to be way more enjoyable. And you can also, it's easier to tell if you have plateaued because of the faster progression rate. Because let's say you're just doing dumbbell lateral raises and you plateaued, but usually it takes you weeks to even gain one rep. So when you've actually plateaued, it takes longer for you to figure out. Whereas something can progress faster, it's quicker to figure out if you've plateaued. But really, again, it's the main thing of psychological element of being able to progress faster. That's why I recommend a elbow loaded lateral raise. And let's go over the key features of a female gaze physique, right? Firstly, you need to have developed abs, as in hypertrophy, as in getting really strong at decline sit-ups, doing 20, 30 kilos with a weight behind your neck, doing cable crunches with really heavy weight. You need to have a full upper chest like this, right? This is a huge halo if you have a full upper chest, because most gym bros don't have that. And if you have a lacking upper chest, again, it can look really bad and even subhuman. Low body fat, again, because that's what's needed for a defined abs and just your physique in general, and a biceps dominant arm. If your arm is triceps dominant, it's really easy to just end up having a fat arm type of appearance. So if that does happen, it might be in your best interest to stop training triceps directly, or even limit your pressing so that your triceps can atrophy back down and you can get the right proportions. Again, because it's all about proportions. And yeah, if you want to join BP Fitness and check out my BP Fitness physique system, you can go check that out. Link in the description. I got all the good stuff, right? All the BP physique theory, all the science-based lifting stuff, everything that you may need. Go check that out, and I'll see you in the next video.